Hi, welcome to another Unity 3D tutorial from BSD Academy. In this video, we'll be looking at how to make your character jump. You can easily apply this to any 2D or 3D games, so let's get started. Before we go into Unity, please go to this link and download the project files. Once you've done that, you should have a compressed file, a zip file. You need to extract it and get the Unity package file. Okay, once you've done that, you can open up Unity and create a new scene. With your scene created, go to the project window, right-click, import package, custom package, select the Unity package file, and click open. In this pop-up, you want to make sure that all the items are ticked, and then import them all. Okay, next, select these two prefabs and drag and drop them into the scene or the hierarchy view so that we can actually see them. Okay. Okay, we also need to reposition the camera because right now it's too far away from everything. So let's go to the transform. Actually, let's just find it. So 0 and minus 1.5. Okay, that's pretty good. And also light, because right now I can't see the edge of the floor, the ground. So I'm gonna turn it straight down. Okay, that's good. And I want to make them smaller because they're getting in the way. And also hide the grid. So select the player, frame it. Okay, so without doing anything else, let's just play the game. Okay, maximize the player window. Use the WASD keys or the arrow keys to control the player. So he runs around, but he doesn't jump. Okay. Let's fix that. Let me just select the player and right click on him, create an empty object. Call this foot sensor. And while it's selected in the inspector window, we need to give it a collider also, box collider. And we need to resize it. What this is we want it to be right underneath the feet of the player so that when it touches the ground, that's when we allow the player to jump. Okay, so let's resize this to something small. I think 6 will do. And let's do the same for the Y. Actually, let's go back to 3D view. Let's make it really small. Okay, and we need to move it down. Yeah, okay, I think 6. So let's see it. It's basically a really thin tube that's just underneath the player's feet. Okay. All right, so next thing, because right now it doesn't do anything, we need to give it a script. New script. Make sure the language is set to C#, and let's call this jump logic. Okay, now that's created. Oh, one more thing. This collider, you see the collider for the player, its trigger is not ticked. So that's why when I press play, it's going to, if I just uncheck the renderer for the floor so that we only see its collider. So if I press play, you see the floor and the player. See, these two have physical interactions. So the collider for the floor is not allowing the collider for the player to go through it. Okay, but we don't want the same thing to happen for the foot sensor because it's all. Let me just rename this. It's only there as a trigger. That's exactly what it is. So we need to make it a trigger. Okay, and we need to open the script by double-clicking on it. Okay, so this is automatically generated by Unity. And here we have two functions. We have the start function, which will run once after the game object is loaded. In this case, this script is attached to foot sensor. So when foot sensor is completely loaded, this function will run once, only once. And after that, the void update function is going to run, well, if your game is running at 60 frames per second, this function will run 60 times per second. So it runs once every frame. But for us, that's not really necessary. We don't need to run our code every single frame because the event that we're interested in is when the trigger on the foot sensor is touching the floor. Okay, so to do that, we can just make a new function, and let's call it private because we don't need other objects to access this function. So private void, and this one's called on trigger stay. Okay, and you notice this function has an argument other, and is a type of collider. We'll be using this later on, but for now, let's just do a simple debug log, and let's just type in player is grounded. Oh, actually, we need to save this and go back to our game. Oops, moved the wrong thing. And press play. You see, the log is only updating after it hits the ground, so I'm not sure if that's okay. One way to make it more obvious is to increase the drag on the player so that it doesn't fall down as quick. So let's press play again. Okay, it's still falling way too quick. So 10. Right. You see, it's only updating after it touches the ground. So that's good. Okay, but that's not enough because we also want to find out whether the player has pressed the spacebar to jump. So for that, we need another conditional, say in put dot get key bracket key code space space. So when this returns true, we will run something. For now, let's do another debug. And say space bar pressed. Okay, and save. Go back to our game. Press play. Okay, if I press the spacebar now, you see the console log being updated. Okay, it's updating more than once because the amount of time I have the spacebar pressed down, the game has run 4 frames. So right now we already have the conditions for the player to jump. So now all we need to do is actually make him jump. So the code for that is, first of all, we need to get component in parent. Okay, and the component that we are after is called rigid body. Okay, what is this then? Let's see. The script is attached to foot sensor. Okay, foot sensor is a child of player sprite. So when we say get component in parent in the foot sensor script, we are referring to player sprite. So we're getting a component from here. And the one that we want is the rigid body. And let me just set it back to 0. This one. Okay. And the rigid body has a method that's called add force. Oh, we need the brackets as well. Add force. Okay. Brackets. And the force we are applying to the player is up. But you see, because if we try to do rigid body, we have two types of rigid body. Okay? We have rigid body 2D and rigid body. Rigid body is a 3D component, so it works with X, Y, and Z. So when we add a force, it takes in a vector 3. So what a vector 3 is basically X, Y, and Z. So we need to say vector 3 dot up. Okay, and we need to make it an impulse. Okay, now let's save the file and go back to our game. Press play. Now our character can jump. Alright, so let's now make some platforms for him as well. In the hierarchy view, go to 3D objects and create a cube. Resize it to something smaller. Actually, x 0.5, y 0.1, 0.5, 0.01, yep. 5. Okay, let's make this a bit wider. Okay. Alright, maybe it's a bit too high for the character to reach. So, and also we need to move it out of the way. 0.5. Okay. Obviously, he's not going to reach that platform because he can't jump that high. So now is a good time to add a control for how high the character can jump. Okay, let's go back to our script. Before we do that, we need to make a variable. And also this one needs to be public. Float. Let's call this jump power. Okay, and then we can multiply this force by the jump power. Save the file, go back to Unity, and select our foot sensor. We now have an additional field under our script, jump power. If we make this something like 3 and play the game again, he can jump taller than before, but still not enough. Let's say 5. Ooh. Okay, that may be a bit too much. Try 3.5. Alright. Cool. Let's make a couple more. Let's call this P1. Duplicate it a couple times. Call this P2, P3, P4. And then we should make an empty game object, call it platform, and put them in here. Put the platform in environment. Now we just need to reposition them. Hold on. Oh, we need to zero out all the positions. So this is 0.5. P2 will be maybe -1. Oh no, not on the Z, should be on the Y. I mean minus 0.5. Let's make it a little bit taller, 0.3. Let's try 3. And the third one would be 1. No, too high. 0.8. Okay. And the fourth one, let's make it 1.5. Let's make it 1.2. All right. Let's see how this works. Yay. Okay. Maybe tilt the light just a little bit more. Maybe 5. Okay. Now, this was why we had to create another object with another collider inside of player sprite, because if we used this collider, this one, for the jump, then when the player touches the bottom of a platform, that would trigger it as well. So that was why it was important to make a very tiny trigger right underneath his feet, so that they wouldn't trigger with anything else but the ground and the platforms. Okay, so we're almost done. Now the last couple things to do is to add animations to his jump. So if we go into the animation folder and controller folder and select player animation control, okay, under window, open up the animator window. So this is Unity's state machine. So it's basically a rule-based system to control animation. On the left side of this animator window, we have layers and parameters. So if we switch over to parameters, we can see 2. One is run, one is jump. So what these things are, they are the triggers that control how the transitions happen. So if I have the player sprite selected and play the game, okay, you can see the idle animation is looping, okay? If I move around, you can see that it's transitioning to the run animation. If I don't move, it goes back to the idle animation. What's controlling this transition is the value of the run parameter. So if I click on this arrow, so the one on the left, that is the transition from idle to run, and it happens when the run parameter is true. Okay, the other arrow from run to idle happens when run is false. So we want the same thing to happen for the jump, which I've already set it up for you. You see, but the reason that when I jump it's not transitioning is because there is nothing to control the value of jump. You see, when I move around, this value, this run parameter actually gets toggled on and off. So that's what's controlling the run transitions. We need to implement the jump the same way. So if we go into the code, so in script, character control, if we open this up, you will see that, where is it? Hold on. Okay, you'll see when the horizontal keys are pressed or the vertical keys are pressed. So what the horizontal and vertical keys are, if we go into edit, project settings, input, and in the inspector window under axis, horizontal is left, right, A, and D. So any of these keys represent horizontal. Vertical is up and down, S and W. Okay. So when any of these keys are pressed, I'm setting the run parameter to true. Else, so if none of the horizontal or vertical keys are pressed, I'm setting the run parameter to false. Okay. So we need to do the same thing in the jump logic. So when the space key is pressed, I want to apply a force so it jumps, as well as changing its animation. So what we need to do here is get component in parent again. This time we're getting the animator, not animation, animator. Okay, and we're setting the Boolean value, brackets, and inside the brackets we need to specify which value we're setting. In our case it's jump, and the value we're setting that parameter to. So in this case we're setting it to true. Okay, now it also needs to turn back to false when it hits the ground, right? So we need to make another function on trigger enter. So on trigger enter basically triggers when the collision happens, right? So when the collision happens, I'm going to do the same thing, get component in parent, animator, set bool, jump, false. Okay, and save. Go back to our game. Now if we press play, it should have the have the jump animation. Yay, it does. So it's no longer just the idle, boring pose when it's in the air. Okay. All right. That's it for this jump mechanic. In the next lesson, we'll be looking at how to make the camera follow the player. So rather than the camera always staying in the same place, like it is now, I mean, we can never play the game for longer than 30 seconds. So yeah, until next time.